This is happiness, to be everything at once. Be unblinded, be unlearned, be unbridled and unburned.
Hey everyone, welcome back to a brand new episode of Mood Prep. My name is Dave Nixon and I have one more week worth of pre-sales for my book, The Human Movement. So if you haven't already, it would mean the world to me if you jumped on and get your own pre-order. You can find it in the comments or the details section of this podcast. You'll also find it within the Mood Prep online group, and you'll also find it on my Facebook. If we're not already Facebook friends, we totally should be. But otherwise, or on my Facebook page as well, Dave Nixon. Otherwise, team, we're going to get stuck straight into this podcast. So today I came back across a poem, rather, not a podcast, a poem that I remember reading when I was about 13 or 14 that I actually really loved, which is strange. I had this little window in my life where I really loved poetry, and then I realized as I got to like 15, 16 that chicks didn't like dudes that liked poetry. Maybe some did, but apparently none of the ones that I was talking to. So I probably had a little like period of time in my life where I sort of changed my interest, so to speak. But this poem I remember reading it. I lived in Eden at the time, and I was laying on my bed. I remember reading this actual poem. It's by George Bernard Shaw, and the poem's actually called A Splendid Torch. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to read it out to you guys, and then I'm going to pull it apart, I guess, now as I'm a bit older in relation to what it actually means. And I suppose you probably find that it's kind of consistent with a lot of the messages that I say through this anyway. But yeah, I'm not sure if poetry's ever been your thing or not. But if you like rap music, then I guess definitely poetry has been at some stage. But either way, here we go. So this is George Bernard Shaw, A Splendid Torch. This is the true joy in life. Being used for a purpose recognized by yourself as a mighty one. Being a force of nature instead of a feverish, selfish clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world would not devote itself to making you happy. I am of the opinion that my life belongs to the whole community, and as long as I live, it is my privilege to do for it whatever I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die, for the harder I work, the more I live. I rejoice in life for its own sake. Life is no brief candle to me. It is sort of a splendid torch which I have a hold of for the moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it over to future generations. That guy is George Bernard Shaw, and the poem itself is called A Splendid Torch. Now, it's interesting that I sort of come back across this. I think I came back across it maybe my mid-20s, about 12 years after I first read it, and I was like, oh, I remember this poem, and it's quite sort of powerful, sort of going, well, what did it mean to me then at that younger age? What did it mean to me in my mid-20s? And then what does it mean to me? What does it mean to me now? And it's interesting if I go through, and even if you just look at the first two lines, that this is the true joy in life, being used for a purpose, recognized by yourself as a mighty one. Now listen to that, being used for a purpose, right? That means that your life is actually worth something. It's actually being used for a specific purpose, but it's not just any purpose. It's a purpose that you recognize to be a mighty one. And this is interesting because a lot of the people that sit there and they go like, what's the meaning of life? And while they're sitting around pondering the meaning of life, there's people out there that are going, you know what? I need to give my life some meaning. And that's the power in it as well, is going, while I can ponder the meaning of life, sure, but actually I understanding that I have the power to give my life meaning for whatever meaning I want to give it, and then making sure I use my one life for that. Now that really is self-power. And so even the first two lines, it leads into something like that I think is really quite powerful. Now, being a force of nature, because now technically that's all you are, right? Instead of a feverish, selfish clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world would not devote itself to making you happy. Complaining and entitled. I mean, this is probably pretty interesting now if I look at this and going, well, we're not owed anything. The world doesn't owe us a fucking thing. No one in particular either owes you anything. It's like, but I did this for them. It's like, yeah, they don't owe you anything. They're like, but by law, it's like, yeah, sure. But law is still a man-made construct. An important one, yes, but it's not owed in that sense. And when we can be in that, when we can realize that no one owes me, then they don't own you, right? And when you can let that, let's say for lack of a better term, debt go and you can own your own shit, you stop complaining. You stop thinking about that selfish component of going, well, hang on a sec, I've been hard done by. Yeah, we've all been hard done by, and some of us worse than others, 100%, right? And we could sit here and share stories, and I'm sure we'll both cry. And like you hear some stories, and it's like, fuck, that's horrific. But then you hear what the person's doing most of the time with their life, and they end up like being such an important person in their community, but they've been through such rubbish stuff, and you're like, isn't that a good sign of character why we shouldn't always be protecting people? Because more than not, we see the people that are hardened by adversities come through the other side strengthened, and then they can actually teach people to be strong rather than glorifying victimization. I'm not saying you shouldn't learn when to be a victim. Go back and listen to my podcast with Dane Christensen. We pulled it all apart. It's very important to understand that. But what I am getting at is that at what point does it turn from victim to victor? That's up to you. And moving on, it goes, I'm of the opinion that my life belongs to the whole community. And as long as I live, it is my privilege to do for it whatever I can, right? And this is what's super interesting, is that I continually talk about contributing. It's like we have no idea how much of an impact we could potentially make just by living the life that we want to live. And I mean a genuine positive impact. Like if you're playing small, which kind of leads into my next point anyway, but if you're playing small, then like that's not doing anyone a favor. It's not doing anyone a favor. And when we understand that playing small is just giving everyone else permission to keep playing small as well, we start to see the world a little bit differently. But when we look at our life's work, our life's purpose, and our energy going into contributing to something bigger than ourselves, and all of a sudden our life has meaning, right? That's what happens when people have families. Like, things change. It's like, yeah, you got your own little fucking community running around your house, man. Of course it's changed. Now you've got purpose. There's meaning there now. Makes complete sense, right? And moving on, it's like, life is no brief candle to me. It is sort of a splendid torch which I have a hold of for the moment. And I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it over to future generations. Let's go. Life is no brief candle. But it is that like precious, isn't it? Right? Like it's that, what's the word? Like just tender. At any point in time, a candle can blow out, and that's just how precious life can be sometimes. So we have to understand that that's what it is, but don't play small. That's the whole point of this conversation. Once again, it's like, it's not just a brief candle. Like, it is a sort of splendid, not just any old fucking torch. It's a splendid torch, because no fire is the same as the next. They don't like burn the same way, so to speak. They don't look the same. And this is sort of like understanding that the fire and the light within us is so powerful because it's so unique. That's the point, which I have a hold of for the moment, because you only get the moment, right? You only have now in that moment. This is what's, yeah, for the moment. And then he goes, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it over to future generations. It's cliche, but it's like, goes back to the whole idea of going, for the moment, that's all we have, and that means that we're alive because it's burning. That fire is burning within us, right? Rather than just sort of simmering, waiting to die. And then to finish off, be the example. Hand it on to future generations, because that's the biggest thing. And if you look at, when I speak to coaches in a lot of the seminars and conversations that I have, I'm like, if someone's coming to you and they want help losing weight, they're not just saying, can you help me lose weight so I look good in a dress? What they're saying is, can you please help me change the direction of my grandchildren that haven't been born yet, based upon the habits and thoughts and education that I'm at now? Like, we're not just dealing with it here and now, we're dealing with everything that goes with it from there on in. So it goes to the point of, don't be that selfish clot of ailments. Like, own your shit, all of it. And when we do that, we're no longer the victim, and when we can do that, we can move forward, and our life truly can be a splendid torch. So there you go, George Bernard Shaw, my favourite quote. Quote, poem, one of them. There's two of them that I have. Another one by James Elroy Flecker. Indeed. All right, team, I'm out. Done. Thank you very much for listening to my ramblings or my poem. As always, if you found this podcast beneficial, it would mean the world to me if you could pass it on to someone else that you think would also find it beneficial. And like I said at the start of this podcast, if you haven't already, jump on and have a look at The Human Movement, my book. I've got a week left of pre-sales. If you want to grab your copy, you should be able to find out the details of this podcast. Otherwise, until tomorrow, peace and pizza, kick today in the dick, slay the dragon. I'll see you soon.
To be everything at once, be unblinded, be unlearned, be unbridled and unburned.